É uma honra estar com todos vocês aqui para o encerramento do nosso evento, na parte formal, mas o início da nossa guerra. Eu nunca participei de uma eleição, eu sempre trabalhei por todos eles que estão aqui, eu sempre fiquei nos bastidores com todos eles, para tentar construir antes de tudo o time, a causa e a casa. Nós não seremos parados por absolutamente ninguém. O nosso destino é governar o Brasil.
This man has a hell of a chance of becoming Brazil's next president. And why that matters to US conservatives, perhaps even more than the Iran quagmire or Trump's loud boasts. Brazil will hold nationwide elections on October this year, and as always, the race was already on everyone's mind a full year before election day. If you read Brazilian headlines or expert analysis around the middle of last year, there seemed to be a consensus. Lula's administration had low approval. He didn't appear able to bring anything new besides more taxes and Biden-like public gaffes. At the same time, the governor of São Paulo, Tarcísio de Freitas, was consistently presented as the pole position, the front-runner for the presidency. He was popular in his state, had the backing of still popular former President Jair Bolsonaro, and was also seen favorably by Brazil's deep state embodied in the STF, the Supreme Court. Tarcísio is a friend of some of the ministers. Above all, the markets loved him, and the part of the media too. However, in late July, something happened. A bombshell was dropped. Something unprecedented and impossible to anticipate for a political analyst. At the relentless insistence of Jair Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo Bolsonaro, President Trump turned his artillery towards a new target, Brazil's Supreme Court and Brazil's economy itself. Eduardo's plan was to secure his father's release from jail in exchange for Trump lifting a punitive 50% tariff on most Brazilian products, a kind of outrageous ransom exchange made on his own country by Eduardo Bolsonaro. Somehow, Bolsonaro and Eduardo supporters, who call themselves patriotas, expected the Brazilian public opinion to rally behind Eduardo and President Trump himself to pressure Alexandre de Moraes into freeing Jair Bolsonaro. But of course, that's not what happened. The STF and President Lula, once bitter enemies a few years ago, had become allies after the January 8th attack, the Brazil's version of the Capitol attack, here made by Bolsonaro supporters. Over the last years, many measures Lula couldn't make pass through Congress were instead implemented through the STF, and opposition initiatives that President Lula couldn't block in Congress were halted after unconstitutional court interventions by the STF on Lula's behalf. When Trump's tariff bomb hit Brasilia, both Lula and the STF were already widely disliked by many Brazilians. With the perception that the country was now under attack by a foreign superpower, as an attack encouraged by what many saw as a national traitor, Eduardo Bolsonaro was behind all that. This sparked a new wave of nationalism, a kind of left-wing nationalism. All this, in turn, strengthened support for Lula's efforts to reverse the tariffs. Tarcísio de Freitas then found himself torn between loyalty to the Bolsonaro family and his duty to defend Brazilian interests as São Paulo's governor. As we all know, Lula and Trump eventually reached a very friendly understanding. The tariffs were largely withdrawn, and the net effect of this turmoil was a resurgence in Lula's popularity and his renewed grip on a potential fourth presidency. As 2025 came to a close, Lula was far ahead in the polls, and the opposition still hadn't chosen a candidate. Jair Bolsonaro was in jail, Tarcísio de Freitas kept insisting that he wouldn't run for presidency and that Jair Bolsonaro remained his candidate, for whom he would vote, and no other name had emerged in the opposition as 2025 came to an end. But then things took another unexpected turn. In December, the very ill and still in jail Jair Bolsonaro finally made up his mind and chose his eldest son, Senator Flávio Bolsonaro, as his candidate for the presidency this year. Flávio's candidacy was met with disbelief from analysts, the press, and even parts of the right. Although a senator, Flávio had little in terms of a political resume or major accomplishments in anything, and he carried with him a large shadow of corruption allegations from his past. He was also seen by critics as right-wing critics as too aligned with the deep state, the STF, Gilmar Mendes. Even sectors of the right see him like that. But once again, the unexpected happened. Flávio quickly rose in the polls and now appears in first place, 1 or 2 points ahead of President Lula.
Oh, meu amigo, eu tô tão feliz. Estou aqui.
Eu não sei o que fazer, não sei o que responder.
O que eu falo?
O filho do Bolsonaro quer ser meu amigo. Ele já tá me seguindo.
Seus amigos perseguindo. Sei o que é seguindo.
O filho do Bolsonaro quer ser meu amigo. Esse mundo gira, esse mundo dá volta.
As one supported by both the Bolsonaro movement and segments of the institutional establishment, especially the judicial establishment, many now see Bolsonaro, Flávio Bolsonaro, as Brazil's future president. In addition to that, President Lula has stated a number of times that he may give up the election dispute anytime soon, the next months. The shame of ending his outstanding career as a poor old fool backed by a Mr. Nobody like Flávio Bolsonaro seems to be too much for him. But this isn't the end of the story. As Flávio surged in the polls, another name began climbing quietly from near zero to almost third place, Renan Santos. But who is Renan Santos? Renan was one of the driving force behind Dilma Rousseff's impeachment in 2016, alongside Kim Kataguiri and others who later joined him in the newly formed party Missão, which means mission. His platform includes ambitious proposals transforming Brazil's favelas into secure neighborhoods, classifying drug cartels as terrorist organizations, echoing policies already enacted by President Trump doing this, and applying a hardline approach similar to Bukele's in El Salvador, with long prison sentences for those involved in drug cartels. Beyond security, Renan Santos proposed something rarely attempted in Brazil's 2,000-year history: a deep federal intervention in the poorer North and Northwest regions to weaken entrenched local elites and aggressively restructure those regions' economies into modern, competitive systems. Many presidents have proposed similar change. Many from the left have proposed similar changes, but these regions remain marked by poverty, underdevelopment, and heavy reliance on government aid. Renan presents himself as determined to break that poverty cycle. His rise in the polls has been strongest among younger voters, even though his name is rarely mentioned in mainstream media in Globo, especially a media which many see as closely tied to Brazil's establishment, to the deep state. If Lula actually gives up, it is extremely probable that the second round of the election, which will be in November, and which comprises only the two most voted candidates, will be between Renan Santos and Flávio Bolsonaro. Many are silently pondering this scenario in Brazil right now. Even if Lula remains on the stage and he isn't able to reverse his decline in popularity, is still likely to have Renan on the second round of the election. No other candidate rose his numbers among the young as him. No other candidate has such a strong digital presence this many years. And besides that, Renan has a strong stance against both Lula and the Bolsonaro family, and it resonates with a large portion of the people, of those who vote in Brazil. As in the US, the decisive factor isn't just who people prefer when they are asked for those who make the polls, but who actually turns out to vote. Many of Flávio's supporters are middle-aged boomer, older voters who oppose Lula's policies, who deeply dislike Lula, but don't feel a strong personal connection to Flávio Bolsonaro himself. Will these voters actually turn out on election day? Abstention rates in Brazil have exceeded 50% in past elections, an astonishing level. By contrast, Renan Santos' younger and more motivated supporters are far more likely to show up to vote, to actually vote, and even bring along family and friends. And why all this matter to the United States at any level? Among Brazil's right-wing figures, Renan Santos is arguably one of the most connected to the American right. Before launching his presidential bid, he toured Washington, meeting figures like Curtis Yarvin, tech industry Trump supporters, and possibly even J.D. Vance, but this has not been confirmed. If Renan succeeds, it likely won't go unnoticed by the post-Trump American right, certainly won't go unnoticed. Renan's combination of Bukele-style security policies and Milei-style economics may resonate way beyond Brazil's borders. At the same time, his total focus on the Z generation, his great effort to position himself as the Z generation candidate, goes in stark contrast to the populist right appeal on boomers, which is the basis of both Trump and Bolsonaro support. Renan Santos could signal the emergence of a new, younger Gen Z right-wing movement shaping government across the West in a post-Trump era. And we all hope that it will be a right much more concerned with China's grip all over the West, especially on Brazil, the West's moral and cultural decline, than with stupid Middle East Ayatollah quid pro quo.